I used to think my life was a fortress. 15 years of marriage to Laura, two incredible kids, a house we'd turned into a home. These were the stone walls, the sturdy foundations I believed were impenetrable. I'm an architect, so metaphors about structure come naturally to me. I design buildings to withstand storms and the slow, relentless pressure of time. I thought I had built my life with the same care, the same foresight. Laura was a high school English teacher, the kind students adored. She had a passion for literature that was infectious, a way of making dusty old poems feel alive and urgent. When she talked about her work, her eyes would light up, and I would fall in love with her all over again. She was the heart of our fortress, the vibrant life within the walls I had so carefully constructed. Our children, 12-year-old Sophie and 10-year-old Liam, were our whole world. They were bright, funny, and full of the chaotic energy that makes a house a home. I thought we were happy. I thought the quiet rhythm of our live school runs, soccer practice, family dinners, homework help was a sign of stability, a testament to the strength of our foundation. I saw it as a beautiful, intricate design we had created together. I was wrong. The foundation was riddled with cracks I couldn't see, and the heart of my fortress was secretly plotting its own demolition. The first tremor was almost imperceptible. It was a change in the atmosphere, a subtle shift in the tectonic plates of our relationship. Laura became distant. She, who had always shared every detail of her day, every funny anecdote from her classroom, suddenly became quiet, guarded. Her phone, which used to lie abandoned on the kitchen counter for hours, was now her constant companion, always clutched in her hand or placed screen down on the table. A nervous energy began to hum around her. She started staying late at school several nights a week. Drama club rehearsals are a killer this semester, she'd say with a sigh. Or, I'm tutoring a few students who are falling behind. They really need the extra help. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was a dedicated teacher. This was who she was. I'd handle dinner and bedtime with the kids, telling myself that this was what a partnership looked like, picking up the slack when the other was overwhelmed. But the late nights became more frequent, the excuses more vague. She started talking incessantly about one student in particular, Ethan. He was the lead in the school play, a charismatic, talented senior who, according to Laura, had a difficult home life and a brilliant mind. He just needs a little extra guidance, she'd say. He has so much potential, but no one at home to nurture it. I saw her dedication as admirable, another reason to be proud of the woman I had married. I was a fool. The distance between us grew into a chasm. Our physical intimacy, once a warm and easy language, became stilted and rare. When I tried to reach for her at night, she would feign sleep or pull away, murmuring something about being exhausted. The fortress was becoming cold, the silence within its walls deafening. I felt a gnawing unease, a sense that something was fundamentally wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I was an architect staring at a blueprint of my own life, unable to see the fatal design flaw that was about to bring the whole structure crashing down around me. I tried to breach the growing distance, to repair the hairline cracks I was beginning to see in our foundation. I suggested a family weekend away, a trip to the coast, anything to reconnect, to remind us of the us that seemed to be fading under the weight of her newfound responsibilities. Her reaction was not what I expected. It wasn't a gentle decline or a practical discussion of schedules. It was an explosion. We were in the kitchen, the kids thankfully absorbed in a movie in the living room, their innocent laughter, a stark, painful contrast to the venom that was about to fill the air. Her voice was a harsh, corrosive whisper, a sound I had never heard from her before. A weekend away? Are you serious? When would I have time for that? My entire life is work, and this house, and the kids. It's relentless. It never stops. I stared at her, confused. We had always been a team, a partnership. I pulled my weight, more than my weight, especially lately. You go to your office, she continued, her words laced with a bitterness that stunned me. You have your own space, your own adult life. I am just a mom, a teacher, a wife. I am drowning. I have nothing that's just for me. The accusation, so profoundly unfair, hung in the air between us, thick and poisonous. It was the first time she had ever spoken of our children, of our beautiful, chaotic, love-filled life, as a burden. It was the first time she had weaponized her role as a mother against me, positioning herself as a martyr to the family I thought we were building together joyfully. I was floored, unable to process the sudden shift from loving partner to resentful prisoner. I just thought it would be nice, I stammered, feeling like I was on the defensive in a battle I didn't even know we were fighting, for all of us, to reconnect. Well, you thought wrong, she snapped, turning her back on me to stare out the window at the garden we had planted together. Some of us have responsibilities that can't just be packed into a weekend bag. That conversation was a turning point. It was a declaration of war. Her resentment was no longer a subtle undercurrent. It was a raging river, and she was deliberately positioning me and our innocent children on the opposite bank. She was meticulously constructing a new narrative, a story in which she was the victim, a prisoner of a life she had actively chosen, a life I thought we both cherished. This false narrative became her shield, her justification for everything. Her new story, this fiction of her, as the overwhelmed, unappreciated martyr, became her constant refrain. It was the alibi she used to justify her increasing absence, both emotional and physical. Every time I gently questioned her late nights, every time I tried to point out the growing chasm between us, she would deflect by throwing our family in my face. It was a cruel and effective tactic, designed to shut down any real conversation and paint me as the villain. I was just grabbing a drink with some other teachers, she'd say with an exasperated sigh, after coming home past midnight, smelling of wine and a sharp, unfamiliar cologne. It's the only chance I get to feel like a normal person, not just someone's mother. Can't you understand that? The implication was clear. I was trapping her, and her escapes were my fault. Another time, after she missed Liam's soccer game for a last-minute tutoring session, I tried to explain how disappointed he was. Her response was ice cold. "I need this time at school," she said, her voice sharp. "It's the only place where I am valued for my mind, not for what I can do for other people. Liam will get over it. He needs to understand that my life doesn't revolve solely around his." She was systematically devaluing her role in our family, reframing it as a form of thankless servitude. The irony was a suffocating weight in my chest. I was the one holding our family together while she was actively pulling away. I was the one making sure the kids felt loved and secure. I was the one cheering at soccer games and helping with science projects, all while their mother was treating them like an anchor, holding her back from some imaginary, more fulfilling life. The fortress was under siege, not from an external enemy, but from its own queen. The heart of the castle was trying to tear it down, stone by stone, and she was using our most precious treasure as her children as the wrecking ball. Her words were a slow-acting poison, designed to make me feel guilty for wanting my wife to be present, for wanting my children to have their mother. She was building a wall of resentment between us, and with every justification, with every sigh of exhaustion, with every barbed comment about her responsibilities, she added another brick. I was beginning to realize that the life she claimed to be drowning in was not the problem. The problem was that she was desperately searching for a reason to escape it, and she had decided that her own family was the most convenient excuse. The gnawing suspicion in my gut became a constant, sickening churn, a permanent resident in my consciousness. Her excuses were wearing thin, their edges frayed from overuse. The narrative she was spinning, that of the overwhelmed wife and mother seeking solace in her work, was starting to feel less like a genuine cry for help and more like a carefully constructed lie, an alibi. I had never been the jealous type. In our 15 years together, I had never once felt the need to check up on her, to question her whereabouts, to scroll through her phone. Trust was the central load-bearing wall of our entire marriage, the pillar upon which everything else rested. But that wall was crumbling, and I could feel the whole structure of our life groaning under the strain. I needed to know if it was just my own paranoia, my own stress manifesting as suspicion, or if there was a real, structural threat to our family. I had to become an investigator in my own home, a role I never wanted. I started with our phone records, an act that felt like a profound betrayal of the man I used to be, the man who trusted his wife implicitly. But that man was living in a fantasy. I needed to live in the real world, no matter how ugly it turned out to be. I felt a wave of guilt as I logged into our family plan account online. my hands trembling slightly as I typed in the password. This felt like a point of no return. I downloaded the detailed statements for the last 3 months, the PDF files landing on my desktop like unexploded bombs. I opened the first file. My architect's eye, trained to see patterns in complex data, began to scan the columns of dates, times, and numbers. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. And then I saw it. One number. A number I didn't recognize, repeated over and over again, day after day, week after week. It was a thread of poison woven through the fabric of our lives. There were dozens of calls, many of them late at night, long after I was asleep, some lasting for over an hour. Who was she talking to with such intensity in the dead of night? The texts were even more damning. They were a constant, relentless stream of communication throughout the day, even during times she was supposed to be in the classroom, molding young minds. It was a secret, parallel conversation, a life being lived in the margins of her phone screen. The discovery of the phone records was like finding a structural flaw in the blueprints of my life. It was a glaring error, a sign of a deep, hidden weakness, but it didn't tell me the full story. I had the evidence of a secret, intense communication, but I didn't have the who. Who was on the other end of that line? Who was the recipient of those late-night calls and the hundreds of texts that punctuated her days? My mind raced, trying to piece it together. Was it an old friend? A colleague from school? I cross-referenced the ghost number with every contact I could find in her address book, with the online staff directory for her high school. Nothing. The number was unlisted, a burner, a ghost. This wasn't a casual friendship. This was a calculated deception. The anxiety was a physical thing, a cold knot in my stomach that tightened with every passing hour. I needed to know who this person was. The need for the truth became an obsession, overriding the guilt I felt for my snooping. I was no longer just a husband, I was an investigator, and my own life was the cold case I was trying to solve. The final piece of the puzzle, the piece that would connect the secret calls to the face of my betrayer, came from the most mundane of places, the family iPad. It was the device the kids used for their games and homework, a device Laura and I rarely touched. It usually sat on the kitchen counter, a repository of sticky fingerprints and half-finished games of Minecraft. One evening, after the kids were in bed, after another night of strained silence with Laura, who was, as usual, glued to her phone, I picked up the iPad to look up a recipe. I opened the photo app, planning to search for a screenshot of a recipe I had saved weeks ago, and that's when I saw it. Her phone had recently been synced to the shared family cloud. A series of new albums had been created. Most were innocuous: Sophie's birthday, summer vacation, but one stood out. It was tucked away at the bottom of the list, with a name designed to be overlooked: Class Notes. My heart started to pound a sick, heavy rhythm against my ribs. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. Every instinct screamed at me that I was on the precipice of a discovery that would change everything. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely control my finger as I tapped on the folder. It wasn't filled with notes, it was filled with screenshots of text conversations, and the person she was texting was him, Ethan, the 17-year-old student, the lead in the school play, the boy with so much potential. The screenshots were a horrifying tapestry of manipulation and illicit romance. It was like reading the script of a tragedy, my own tragedy, laid out in blue and gray text bubbles. The conversations were a grotesque parody of love, a sickening blend of her calculated grooming and his adolescent infatuation. There were messages from her, praising his old soul, telling him he understood her in a way her own husband never could. "You see the real me," one of her texts read, the person buried under all the responsibility. She was feeding him a line, casting herself as a tragic, misunderstood figure, and he was swallowing it whole. There were messages from him, filled with the dramatic, overwrought declarations of a teenager in the throes of what he thought was a grand, forbidden love. He wrote her clumsy poetry, sent her links to sad, romantic songs, and spoke of a future where they could be together, away from the prying eyes of the world. It was a fantasy, and she was its chief architect. And then there were the photos. The folder was a gallery of their secret life. Selfies of them together in her empty classroom after school, her head resting on his shoulder, a maternal gesture twisted into something predatory. A photo of a single, cheap-looking rose on her desk, with the caption, "You see me." A photo of a handwritten note from him, a poem filled with clumsy, adolescent angst about star-crossed lovers. It was all there. The secret phone calls, the late nights tutoring, the endless drama club rehearsal sit was all him. It had always been him. I felt a profound, soul-deep sickness, a physical revulsion that rose from my stomach and into my throat. This wasn't just a simple affair, a betrayal between two adults. This was a transgression of the highest order. She hadn't just betrayed me, her husband of 15 years. She had betrayed her profession, her responsibilities, and the sacred trust of a child. She had risked everything, her career, her family, her freedom for a sordid, pathetic fantasy with a boy who was barely old enough to vote. The fortress I had built, the life I had cherished, hadn't just been breached. It had been systematically corrupted from the inside out by the very person I had tasked with guarding its heart. I sat there in the dark living room, the glow of the iPad screen illuminating my face, and a terrible clarity washed over me. My marriage wasn't just over, it was an abomination. The foundation wasn't just cracked, it was built on poison and lies. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the living room couch, the family iPad on the coffee table in front of me, its screen dark, hiding the terrible secrets within. The damning evidence was seared into my brain, a permanent, horrific slideshow of texts and photos. I didn't feel anger, not yet. The shock was too profound, too all-consuming. I felt a cold, hollow emptiness, as if my entire internal structure had been scooped out, leaving nothing but a fragile, echoing shell. I waited. I watched the shadows in the living room lengthen and then retreat as the sun began its slow ascent. I heard the kids get up, their morning routines a painfully normal soundtrack to the most abnormal day of my life. I helped them get ready for school, my movements automated, my voice a hollow echo of its usual warmth. I made them breakfast, packed their lunches, and kissed them goodbye at the door, the simple domestic acts feeling like a performance from a life I no longer lived. And then I waited for her. The calm I felt was unnatural. It was the eerie stillness before a tsunami, a quiet, focused rage that had burned away all the grief and sadness, leaving only a cold, hard resolve. When she walked in the door that afternoon, humming a tune from the school play, a cheerful, oblivious smile on her face, the sight of her sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. She was living in a different reality, a world where she was the romantic heroine of her own tragic play, and I was just a background character, an obstacle to her true happiness. "Hey, hon," she said, dropping her keys on the kitchen counter. "Tough day?" Her voice was so normal, so mundane, it was obscene. "We need to talk," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. I was an architect reviewing a failed project, delivering a fatal diagnosis. My calmness seemed to unnerve her more than any shouting match would have. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then caution. "Okay," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly as she put down her bag. "What's up?" I didn't waste time with accusations or questions. The time for questions was over. I simply walked over to the iPad, which I had left on the kitchen island, and turned it on, the screen immediately displaying the folder of her secret life. "Class notes," I said, my voice dripping with an ice I didn't know I possessed. "You've been doing a lot of tutoring lately." Her face went white. The color drained from her cheeks as if a plug had been pulled, leaving behind a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. She stared at the screen, at the evidence of her betrayal laid bare, then at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She was caught, and the weight of it seemed to physically crush her. I can explain," she stammered, her voice a reedy, pathetic whisper. "Don't bother," I said, cutting her off with a sharp, dismissive gesture. "I've read it all, the texts, the photos, the pathetic teenage poetry. I know everything, Laura. I know about Ethan." She sank into a kitchen chair, her legs seeming to give out from under her. She buried her head in her hands. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the sound of her ragged, panicked breathing. I stood there, watching her, waiting. I expected tears. I expected apologies. I expected the pathetic, predictable performance of a woman caught in a devastating lie. What I got was something far more monstrous, something that would redefine my understanding of her character forever. She lifted her head from her hands, and the panic in her eyes had been replaced by something else, something terrifying. It was a defiant, self-righteous fury. Her face, which moments before had been pale with shock, was now flushed with a dark, ugly rage. This was not the face of a woman filled with remorse. This was the face of a woman who had been cornered, and she was about to lash out. "You did this," she hissed, her voice a low, venomous snarl. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You have no idea what my life is like. The pressure, the constant demands. You get to go to your quiet, orderly office every day while I am dealing with hundreds of hormonal teenagers, and then I have to come home and deal with our kids, with their homework, their problems, their endless, endless needs." My jaw physically dropped. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was actually doing it. She was standing in the smoldering wreckage of her own making and trying to pin the blame on me, on our life together. "And the kids," she continued, her voice rising to a shrill, hysterical crescendo. "My God, the kids, they take everything, they suck the life right out of me. I have nothing left for myself. I haven't been Laura in years. I am just Mom. She spat the name out like poison. "Ethan, he saw me. He saw the woman, the poet, the person I used to be before all of this." She waved a dismissive hand around our beautiful kitchen, the heart of the home I thought we both loved, before this life buried me alive. It was the most grotesque, most profoundly selfish thing I had ever heard. She was using our children, the two innocent lives we had brought into this world, as a shield for her own depravity. She was blaming them for her choices, for her betrayal. She was negating their very existence, their worth, their right to a mother's love, all to justify her sordid, pathetic affair with a child. In that singular, horrific moment, something inside me broke. The last vestiges of the love I had for her, the lingering embers of 15 years of shared history, were instantly and permanently extinguished, leaving only cold, dead ash. I was not looking at my wife anymore. I was looking at a monster, a hollow, self-pitying creature who was incapable of love or accountability. I didn't yell, I didn't scream. My voice, when I finally spoke, was eerily calm, the voice of a man who had seen the abyss and had nothing left to fear. "Get out," I said. "What?" she gasped, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "Get your things," I repeated, my voice like steel, each word a carefully placed stone in the wall I was building between us. "And get out of my house now." The fortress had fallen, but I would not let her stand on its ruins and blame my children for its destruction. Her monstrous justification was the catalyst, the final, unforgivable sin. It was the moment the ground shifted beneath my feet, and I realized my duty was no longer to my wife, but to my children. I had to protect them from her, from the corrosive poison of her self-pity and her profound, bottomless selfishness. If she was willing to use them as a shield for her infidelity, what else was she capable of? The thought sent a chill down my spine. My mission became brutally, terrifyingly clear. I had to get them out. I had to build a new fortress, a smaller one perhaps, but one with walls so high and foundations so deep that she could never breach them again. That night, after she had finally left, after a storm of tears, threats, and accusations about how I was the one destroying our family, I began to plan our new life. The grief was a physical weight, but beneath it a cold, methodical clarity was taking hold. This would not be a long, drawn-out war of attrition. It would be a quiet, decisive victory. There would be no shouting matches, no dramatic confrontations, just a silent, systematic removal of her from our lives. The first call I made, sitting in the dark of my desecrated kitchen, was to a lawyer. I had gotten a referral from a colleague months ago for a completely unrelated matter, but I had kept the number. I called his emergency line. He was one of the best family law attorneys in the state, known for being a shark, and right now I needed a shark. I laid out the facts calmly and clinically. My wife's affair with a minor student, her own verbal admissions to me, and the digital evidence I had saved on a secure, external hard drive. The lawyer was blunt, his voice sharp and focused even at that late hour. "She's not just going to lose custody," he said, and I could hear him typing in the background. "She's going to lose her teaching license, and she could face significant criminal charges. You hold all the cards, Mr. Evans. We need to move quickly and quietly." That was all I needed to hear. The path forward was clear. The next morning I took a personal day from work. The kids were at school, blissfully unaware that their world had been shattered. I used that precious, quiet time to begin the process of extricating our lives from hers. I went to the bank and opened a new account in my name only. I transferred our savings, the money I had earned through years of hard work, into it. I systematically went through every utility bill, every subscription service, every financial tie that bound us together, and I severed it. I was performing a financial amputation, cutting away the diseased limb before the poison could spread further. Then I began to pack. I wasn't just packing clothes, I was curating an escape. I didn't take the furniture we'd picked out together or the art that hung on the walls. I took the things that mattered, the things that made our family ours. I went into Sophie's room and carefully packed her favorite books, the collection of painted rocks she kept on her windowsill, the worn stuffed bear she'd had since she was a baby. I went into Liam's room and packed his endless boxes of Legos, his soccer trophies, the posters of his favorite players. I packed their photo albums, the chronicles of their happy, innocent childhoods. I packed their clothes, my clothes, our passports, birth certificates, all the essential documents. I was erasing us from the house she had desecrated, leaving behind only the hollow shell of a life that no longer existed. I worked with a cold, methodical efficiency that surprised even me. This was not a home anymore. It was a stage, the setting of her betrayal, and I was simply striking the set. Each item I packed was a small act of reclamation, a piece of our life that I was rescuing from the wreckage. I felt no sentimentality for the objects I left behind. The couch where we used to watch movies, the dining table where we shared our meals, the bed where I had slept next to a stranger, they were all tainted, artifacts from a fallen civilization. My last act in that house was to write a note. I had thought about what to say. What final words could possibly encapsulate the enormity of her betrayal, her cruelty? I considered anger, I considered sadness, but in the end, I chose a cold, brutal simplicity. I went to the kitchen, the room where she had stood, and blamed our children for her own sins. I found one of her favorite mugs, a ridiculously cheerful ceramic cup a student had given her, with the words, "World's Best Teacher" printed on it. The irony was so thick it was almost comical. I took off my wedding ring, a simple, heavy gold band, and I dropped it into the mug. The clink it made was a sound of absolute finality. Next to the mug, I left a single sheet of paper with 3 sentences written on it. "You said you wanted a life that was just for you. You said the kids and I were burying you alive. Now you're free." I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. She would know who it was from, and the chilling finality of it, I hoped, would be a more potent punishment than any angry tirade. It was a mirror, reflecting her own monstrous words back at her. When the kids got home from school, I met them at the door with a smile I didn't feel. The house was unnervingly quiet, the car already packed and waiting in the driveway. They knew immediately that something was wrong. Kids have a sixth sense for a disturbance in the force of their world. I sat them down on the couch in the living room, a couch I was about to leave behind forever. It was the hardest conversation of my life. My mind raced, trying to find the right words, the words that would tell them the truth without shattering their innocence completely. How do you tell your children that their mother has not only betrayed their father but has also blamed them for her actions? How do you protect them from a wound inflicted by the one person who is supposed to love them unconditionally? I decided on a strategy of gentle, age-appropriate honesty. I didn't tell them the sordid details about Ethan. They were too young to carry that burden. I focused on the part that affected them directly. "Guys," I began, my voice steadier than I expected it to be. "I have something very important to tell you, Mom and I. We're going to be living in different houses for a while." Sophie, my perceptive, serious daughter, looked at me with wide, worried eyes. Liam, my sweet, sensitive son, immediately looked at the floor. Why? Sophie asked, her voice small. We've been having some adult problems for a while, I explained, choosing my words with surgical precision, and we've decided that it's better for everyone if we live separately. The most important thing for you to know is that this is not your fault. I looked them both in the eye, willing them to believe me. Sometimes grown-ups just can't live together anymore. But we both love you more than anything in the world. Sophie, her eyes welling up with tears, asked the question that I had been dreading, the question that was a direct echo of her mother's poison. Is it because of us? She asked, her voice a small, trembling whisper. Did we do something to make Mommy unhappy? The question was a dagger in my heart. Laura's selfishness, her cruel words, had already started to seep into their consciousness, planting a seed of doubt, of blame, in their innocent minds. I pulled them both into a tight hug, my own eyes burning with a rage I had to suppress. No, I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. It was a mixture of love, fury, and a fierce, protective instinct. Never. You are the best things that have ever happened to me, to both of us. This is about adult things, adult mistakes. This has nothing to do with you. I love you both more than anything in the world, and that will never, ever change. We sat there for a long time, the three of us huddled together on that couch, a tiny, grieving island in a sea of chaos. Then, I stood up. We're going to go on a little adventure, I said, trying to inject a note of excitement into my voice. We're going to stay in a new house for a while. It will be fun. Just the three of us. We left that afternoon. As I drove away, I didn't look back at the house, at the life I was leaving behind. I looked in the rearview mirror at my two children, their faces pale and confused, their entire world upended. And I made a silent vow. I would spend the rest of my life building a world for them so full of love and security that the memory of their mother's cruelty would become a distant, powerless ghost. The first few weeks in our new rented house were a strange kind of limbo. The house itself was a blank canvas, a 3-bedroom suburban box with beige walls and a yard that needed mowing. It was sterile, anonymous, the rooms echoing with the absence of our old life. But it was safe. It was our sanctuary, a new fortress with unbreached walls. My entire focus, my entire being was dedicated to creating a bubble of normalcy for Sophie and Liam in the midst of the chaos. We established new routines immediately, clinging to them like life rafts. School, homework, dinner together at the small, wobbly kitchen table every night at 6, movie nights on Fridays with popcorn and blankets on the living room floor. I was determined to make this new, smaller world feel as stable and loving as humanly possible. I knew I couldn't do it alone. I enrolled them both in therapy with a child psychologist who specialized in family trauma, and I started seeing a therapist myself. I knew I couldn't be the calm, steady father they needed if I was drowning in my own unprocessed grief and white-hot anger. The calls and texts from Laura were relentless, a desperate, chaotic assault on the new peace we were trying to build. She had discovered the empty house, the note, the drained bank account. Her messages, sent from a rotating cast of burner apps and her parents' phones, were a torrent of rage, self-pity, and pathetic pleas. How could you do this to me? How could you take my children away? You've ruined my life. I have nothing. My career is over because of you. Please, let me just talk to them. I'm their mother. You have no right. I never responded. I had blocked every number she used, but she was persistent, a ghost rattling the chains of a life I no longer wanted any part of. My lawyer handled all communication. He had immediately filed for an emergency custody order and filed for divorce, citing her affair with a minor as the primary cause. He was aggressive, efficient, and worth every penny. The legal battle that I had dreaded turned out to be less of a battle and more of a swift, brutal execution. As my lawyer had predicted, she had no leverage. The evidence, the screenshots, the photos, the very nature of her transgression was undeniable. The school had launched its own internal investigation as soon as the rumors started to fly, which they did with astonishing speed. She was immediately suspended pending the outcome. Her parents, my former in-laws, who had at first tried to intervene on her behalf with tearful phone calls and accusations. I fell silent the moment my lawyer made it clear that their precious daughter was facing potential criminal charges for statutory rape. Their primary concern shifted instantly from saving the family to saving Laura from a felony conviction. They hired a high-powered, expensive criminal defense attorney, and suddenly, my marital problems were a secondary concern to them. The fantasy Laura had constructed with her teenage lover imploded with spectacular public force. The old soul, who saw her for who she was, turned on her the moment the scandal broke. Ethan, faced with the horror of a public investigation, the wrath of his own parents, and the potential ruin of his own future, told the school investigators everything. He claimed that Laura had been the aggressor, that she had manipulated him, taken advantage of his trust, and initiated the relationship. He painted himself as the victim, and in the cold, hard light of day, that's what he was. He was a child, and she was the adult who had abused her position of power. Their sordid love story was exposed for what it was, a crime. The news of the scandal ripped through our old community like a shockwave. I heard through the grapevine from the few old friends who had reached out to offer their unwavering support that Laura had become a pariah. She was fired from her job. Her teaching license was permanently revoked, and she was facing a legal battle that would bankrupt her family. The beautiful, charming golden child, the woman everyone had always adored and protected, had fallen, and she had fallen hard and fast. I felt a grim, hollow satisfaction in her downfall. This wasn't a victory. There were no winners here. My children had effectively lost their mother. I had lost the woman I had loved for half my life. But there was a stark sense of justice in it, a sense that the world, which had been knocked violently off its axis, was slowly, painfully righting itself. The consequences she had tried so desperately to evade had found her, and they were swift and merciless. While her world was burning to the ground, I was focused on building a new one. I filled the bare, beige walls of our rented house with the kids' artwork. Sophie had taken up painting, and her canvases, full of vibrant, chaotic color, were a testament to her resilience. Liam's Lego creations covered every available surface. We adopted a rescue dog from the local shelter, a goofy, lovable golden retriever we named Buster, who brought a new level of chaotic joy into our lives and became Liam's constant shadow. We found new parks, new pizza places, new weekend routines. We discovered hiking trails in the nearby hills and spent our Sundays exploring, the three of us and Buster, a small, tight-knit pack. Slowly, painfully, we were healing. We were creating new memories, new foundations, ones that were ours alone. One evening, about 2 months after we left, my lawyer forwarded me an email he had received from her attorney. It was a formal request for supervised visitation with the children. That was to be expected. But attached to the legal document was a personal letter from Laura to me. My lawyer strongly advised me not to read it, to maintain the emotional distance we had so carefully constructed. But I had to. I needed to see if there was any glimmer of remorse, any sign that she understood the depth of the damage she had caused, especially to her own children. The letter was 4 pages long, handwritten on floral stationery, a rambling, self-serving manifesto of victimhood. It was a masterwork of narcissistic deflection. She wrote about her loneliness, her stress, her moment of madness that had spiraled out of control. She blamed her actions on a midlife crisis, on the pressures of her job, on my supposed emotional distance. And then she wrote the lines that confirmed, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that I had made the right decision, that she was still the same monstrously selfish person she had revealed herself to be in our kitchen. "I know I made a mistake," she wrote, "but taking the children away from me is a punishment that doesn't fit the crime. They need their mother, and I need them. They are the only good thing in my life right now." Even now, after everything, she saw our children not as individual human beings she had profoundly wounded, but as possessions she was entitled to. They were her emotional support animals, the good thing that was supposed to make her feel better about the wreckage she had made of her own life. Their purpose, in her mind, was to serve her emotional needs. I deleted the letter. I called my lawyer and told him to agree to the supervised visitation under the strictest possible terms. All communication, without exception, was to go through him. I would not speak to her. I would not see her. The wall of silence remained. The first supervised visit was a sterile, heartbreaking affair, an exercise in carefully managed misery. It took place in a small, windowless room at a neutral family services center, a place that smelled of disinfectant and quiet desperation. A court-appointed supervisor, a tired-looking woman with a notepad, was there to observe and document the interaction. I dropped the kids off in the lobby, my heart aching for them. I knelt down and hugged them both tightly. "Be strong," I whispered. "It's only for an hour. I'll be right here when you're done." I waited in the car, trying to read a book, but the words just swam in front of my eyes. I couldn't stop thinking about the woman who was sitting in that room with my children, a woman who was now a stranger to all of us, a woman who had forfeited the right to be called their mother in any meaningful way. When they came out an hour later, they were quiet, their faces drawn. Sophie was stone-faced, her expression unreadable, a mask of self-preservation she was becoming far too skilled at wearing. Liam just looked sad, his small shoulders slumped. In the car on the way home, the silence was heavy. I didn't press them. I waited for them to be ready to talk. After a few minutes, Sophie finally spoke, her voice flat, emotionless. "She cried the whole time," she said, staring out the window at the passing scenery. "She just kept saying she was sorry and that she missed us." "And what did you say?" I asked gently, my eyes fixed on the road. "Nothing," Sophie said, a hint of steel in her young voice. "I didn't know what to say to her," Liam added, his voice barely a whisper from the back seat. "She asked if we could come home, to the old house. She said she was all alone there." I gripped the steering wheel, a fresh wave of white-hot anger washing over me. Even now, in a supervised visit, she was trying to manipulate them, to plant seeds of guilt, to use them to get what she wanted. "What did you tell her?" I asked, keeping my voice as calm as I could. It was Sophie who answered, and her words were the words of a child who had been forced to grow up far too fast, a child who had seen the truth of her mother's character. "I told her this is our home now," she said, her voice small but firm. "With you." In that moment, a profound sense of pride and love washed over me, so intense it almost eclipsed the anger. We were going to be okay. The fortress I had built for us was small, and the walls were still new, but it was strong. It was built on a foundation of love, truth, and a fierce, unwavering commitment to my children. And it was a fortress she could never, ever touch. A year has passed since our world imploded. A full 4 seasons have cycled through, each one bringing us further away from the fire and closer to a new kind of peace. It has been a year of rebuilding, of healing, of creating a new life from the ashes of the old one. The divorce is final. The legal documents, cold and official, have declared the end of what was once the central pillar of my life. I have sole physical and legal custody of the children. Laura was, miraculously, spared jail time. Thanks to a plea bargain her team of expensive lawyers managed to negotiate. But her life, as she knew it, is over. She lost her career, her license was permanently revoked, her home, and the respect of everyone who ever knew her. She lives in a small, shabby apartment across town, financially supported by her long-suffering parents, a ghost in her own life, a cautionary tale whispered about in our old community. The supervised visits continue, once a month, in that same sterile, soul-crushing room. The kids go, more out of a sense of reluctant duty than any real desire. They are polite, they are distant. They are learning to navigate the complicated, painful terrain of having a mother who loves them in her own selfish way, but who is fundamentally incapable of putting their needs before her own. They are resilient, more resilient than I ever could have imagined. Their laughter fills our small, happy house, and their artwork, a vibrant, chaotic explosion of color and life, covers every inch of our walls. Our dog, Buster, is a furry, joyful, and utterly essential member of our little family. We have our routines, our inside jokes, our shared history that begins not 15 years ago, but on the day we left. We are a team, the 3 of us. My life is quiet now, and in that quiet I have found a profound and unexpected peace. I left my high-pressure architecture firm and took a job with a smaller local company, one that values work-life balance, one that allows me to be home for dinner every single night. I am present for my children in a way I never was before. I am no longer just the architect of buildings. I am the architect of our lives, and I am building something small, simple, and beautiful. Something strong, something true. A few weeks ago, on the 1-year anniversary of the day I drove away from our old life, another letter arrived. It was from her. I recognized her elegant, looping handwriting on the envelope. My first instinct was to throw it in the trash, unopened, but something compelled me to read it. I suppose a part of me was still searching for a sign, any sign, of genuine remorse. The letter was different from her previous ones. The frantic, self-pitying, accusatory tone was gone. It had been replaced by a quiet, hollow sense of defeat. "I understand now," she wrote. "I have had a year of sitting in silence, and I finally understand what I lost. It wasn't just a husband or a house. I lost myself. The person I was, the person I could have been before I became so bitter and lost. I look at photos of us, of the kids, of the life we had, and it feels like watching a movie about someone else's happy life. I know I can never have it back. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I know." The letter ended with a single haunting sentence. "I hope, one day, the kids can find a way to forgive me. I don't expect you ever will." I folded the letter and put it away in a box in the back of my closet, a final artifact from a buried civilization. She was right. I would never forgive her. Forgiveness is a bridge, and she had not only burned it, but she had salted the earth on both sides so that nothing could ever grow there again. But as I sat there, in the quiet of my new home, with the sound of my children laughing in the other room as they played with Buster, I realized something profound. I didn't need to forgive her to be free. The hate, the white-hot anger, it was gone. It had been replaced by a vast, quiet indifference. She was a chapter of my life that was over, a story that had been told. And now, I was writing a new one, a better one. A story about a father and his 2 incredible children building a small, strong fortress against the world. A story of hope, of resilience, and of the quiet, unshakable power of a love that is real. To anyone out there who has had their world torn apart, who has had to face the unthinkable, know this: the demolition is not the end of the story, it is the beginning. You have the power to clear the rubble, to lay a new foundation, and to build something even more beautiful in its place. Thank you for watching. If you found strength in this story, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. There are more stories of survival and rebirth to be told.